Hello and welcome to India's World. While recognizing India's special role in stabilizing the Indian Ocean region, Chinese military officials have said that the region should not be considered as India's backyard. They have warned that doing so can result in clashes. The word backyard, the Chinese feel, is not appropriate to describe an open sea and the international waters of an ocean. This caution comes in the wake of several forays that the Chinese Navy has been making in the Indian Ocean. It also comes at a time when India is turning its gaze seawards with the aim of establishing itself as a continental power and as a maritime power. Both India and China are clearly jostling to expand their strategic space in the Indian Ocean, the third largest ocean in the world, which borders the three continents of Asia, Africa, and Australia. About 80% of the world's oil trade passes through the Indian Ocean. To understand why both India and China are trying to assert their influence in the Indian Ocean, we have with us three distinguished experts. We have with us Ambassador Nalin Suri. He's one of our foremost experts on China. He's been India's High Commissioner to UK, Ambassador to Poland, and of course, Ambassador to China. We have with us Ambassador T.C.A. Rangachari, a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation in New Delhi. He's been India's ambassador to Germany and France. He's handled the China desk at the Ministry of External Affairs for a long time and knows China and the Chinese well. We're also lucky to have with us Dr. Jabin Jacob. He's Assistant Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies and a fellow there. He's also an expert on China, especially in its relationship with South Asia. So I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Master Suri, let me begin with you. Does India really see the Indian Ocean as its backyard? And are the Chinese wrong in asserting that the word backyard is not very appropriate to use for an open sea and the international waters of the Indian Ocean?
I think what probably bothers the Chinese is that the Indian Ocean is named the Indian Ocean. I don't think sensible Indians, whether in government or in the strategic community, talk of the Indian Ocean as India's backyard. But certainly, I think India has very substantial, legitimate interests in the Indian Ocean. And it is our business and our duty to ensure that our interests in the Indian Ocean are protected. And hence, one of our largest naval maritime expansion programs is currently underway. If I'm not mistaken, we have more than 40 naval ships under construction. And I think it would be wrong of us to ignore the Indian Ocean. And therefore, if that bothers others, I mean, that is something they need to worry about. It's not as if we are trying to set up bases in the Indian Ocean region. We have a geographical advantage, of course, and that may mean that we do not have to set up such bases. But the fact that we have very substantial real interest in the Indian Ocean and that we need to protect these interests, not only from the present point of view, not only from the strategic point of view, but also from the developmental point of view.
Okay. Ranga, so do you think that it is both natural and desirable that India eventually functions as the leader and the predominant influence in the Indian Ocean region?
Well, let's disaggregate this. In the first instance, probably the way in which the Chinese have phrased it is not very appropriate. It's not very pretty. But then, these are all waterways which are open for global navigation. One of the things that we have been saying, and during the visit of President Obama, an agreement had been signed in which we made specific reference to freedom of navigation in international waters. Now, just as Indian Ocean is called Indian Ocean, you also have the China Seas, called South China Seas. These are terms which have evolved over centuries, geographic terminology. At one time, the Indonesians used to have problems about calling the Indian Ocean Indian Ocean. In the Gulf, there used to be similarly problems of nomenclature and so on. I think basically what we should focus on is the need to keep freedom of navigation open. India has, as you very correctly point out, a natural advantage because we are right there. Therefore, it is much easier for us to take on responsibilities which for countries which are not in this region and not as well located as India is, may create problems in terms of logistics, it may create problems in terms of supplies, distances, and also in some ways the immediate interest that might be affected. For example, if something happens in Indian Ocean to disrupt the freedom of navigation, let us say, chances are that India, because of its proximity, is more both affected and on the other side in a better position to deal with whatever problem that arises. And in that sense, therefore, for the Chinese to say these are open waters, I don't think is something that we should worry about. That's exactly what we say about, let's say, South China Seas. I think what the Chinese should look at is why is it that they talk in terms of freedom of navigation being okay in the Indian Ocean, but they bristle when you say freedom of navigation in South China Seas. Because then they start asserting sovereignty and they make it out as if the entire South China Seas belongs to China. But overall, I think the problem or the issue that we should look at is freedom of navigation.
Okay. Jebin, when the Chinese say that geographically speaking, India has a special role to play in stabilizing Indian Ocean and the South Asian region, are they suggesting that India should concentrate and limit itself to South Asia and the South Asian region countries that touch the Indian Ocean and not overextend its ambition to have the entire Indian Ocean as its sphere of influence?
No, I don't think that is the only message out there. I mean, that message, for those who want to read it, yes, it can be read as such. But, you know, if they were to say something like that, then they would also limit their options in what can be termed as their backyard in the, you know, the East China Sea, South China Sea. So I think they are a lot more savvier than that. You know, the Chinese need to get involved in South Asia, and they are getting involved in South Asia in a big way. Their maritime Silk Road plans involve South Asia in a big way. So if they say that, you know, this is something of a special responsibility for India, then they will perforce have to deal with India, have to involve India. And in that sense, they are possibly limiting their own options if India doesn't play ball. So I think this statement has been made at this particular point of time with respect to Indian Ocean, but there will be other statements that are made with respect to other subjects. So we need to take all of these in a totality, not, you know, parse everyone separately and focus only on the one statement.
Okay. Masuri, do you agree with those who say that, who think that the Indian Ocean, with its 36 littoral and 14 hinterland states, including several big economies and oil-rich and oil-exporting countries, is or should naturally be India's ocean?
Look, I don't think you can say that it should be India's ocean. There is an Indo-Pacific, there is an Asia-Pacific. You can choose whichever configuration you prefer. I prefer the Indo-Pacific. But just as we have major legitimate rights, as I said at the very beginning, so do other countries. Now, the critical thing is to ensure that sea lines of communications remain open. Yeah. Now, subject to that, everybody is welcome into the Indian Ocean. As long as the Indian Ocean does not get militarized, does not become the source of conflict or potential conflict, I think every other country has legitimate right. Let's face it, now look at it from the Chinese perspective. For them, the Indian Ocean is a very important sea lines of communication. Their development interests are such that a lot of it is related to the outside world. So for them, this becomes even more critical than, for instance, for us at the present point in time. So I think nomenclature apart, there are countries like ours which have an advantage in the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific. China has advantages in the Asia-Pacific. But the critical bottom line is sea lines of communication must remain open. Okay. And obviously, if we feel that our interests are being affected, we will take steps to make sure those interests are protected.
Okay. All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing India and China jostling for influence in the Indian Ocean region. Ranga, should India be concerned over the increasing forays of the Chinese Navy into the Indian Ocean? You know, Chinese submarines, I think one of them nuclear, or both nuclear, docked at Colombo in September and October last year. Then this May, we've had a case of a submarine, Chinese diesel electric submarine passing very close to Indian waters, docking for a week in Karachi. Now, my question to you is this routine activity or should India be concerned about these forays?
Well, even if it is routine activity, if the Chinese motivations, and I would extend that logic, any other country's motivations in sending military vehicles into waters which are close to India, Indian shores, I think the right thing to do would be to keep the country concerned informed. I don't think the level of suspicion or worry or concern in India would have been that great. had India been informed in advance. Now, in the case of Colombo, actually the way things happened, there are now reports saying that even the Sri Lankans were uninformed, they were surprised. This is what the Sri Lankans are saying. It happened at a time when the Japanese Prime Minister was visiting Colombo. With Pakistan, the worry is even greater because of the kind of relationship that Pakistan and China have had, because of the kind of relationship that Pakistan has with India. And the latest, of course, this China-Pakistan economic corridor, which raises real serious concerns in regard to the future of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, how the Chinese are going to deal with it and so on. So therefore, knowing all these sensitivities, and the Chinese are fully aware of India's sensitivities in regard to all these aspects, then if you are to follow through with the kind of warmth that was generated during the visit of Prime Minister Modi between him and President Xi Jinping, it doesn't cost the Chinese anything to keep the Indian side informed.
Okay.
And if that is done, then it would also contribute, everybody talks in terms of the trust deficit, even at the highest levels this is talked about. It will help to bridge that.
Okay.
Second point I would make is that this is not simply limited to the Chinese, because you would recall that not so long ago, there were times when we had difficulties with American military bases in the Indian Ocean, because at that time, and let me go back a little bit to the 80s, when India was perceived as a Soviet ally, one of the most vociferous critiques of India's Indian Ocean policies and naval capabilities, etc., was Australia. So therefore, India has to protect its interests, and irrespective of who is at the other end, we must expect some degree of communication, preferably in advance, so that there is no suspicion, no distrust.
That's a point well made. But Jaymin, I'm sure India has been closely tracking Chinese warships and submarines in the Indian Ocean. But what can India really do except demand transparency as Ranga is doing? Our international waters, are they not, the global commons as they're called, not open to all? And why should China be obliged to inform you each time its submarine or ship crosses international waters?
Look, there are two parts to this. One, I would agree with Ambassador Rangachari that in the interest of better relations, building trust where we have a deficit, it is a good idea for China to inform, right? No, it's not obliged to perhaps, but if relations have to progress when it's in a state of some friction, then this is a good idea.
But Indian ships are also there on long-term deployment of the South China Sea?
Absolutely.
Even now as we talk?
That's right. But then South China Sea is, we are not passing through so close to the coast as the Chinese have tried to do. You see, this is a different order of activity that we are talking about as far as the Chinese are concerned. The second part is, it's also important not to blow it up out of proportion, because if the Chinese are saying that, well, we are passing outside your 12 nautical mile limit, then they are following certain rules. And those rules are international rules, international law. So then we must actually encourage them and hold them to this. Then we have an opportunity to tell them, look, you cannot follow one set of rules in the Indian Ocean and another set of rules in the South China Sea. Okay. So this should be an opportunity for us to hold them to the same principles in the South China Sea, East China Sea, wherever else it might be.
Masuri, do you think that Beijing's ability to project its power into the Indian Ocean is limited because of its, it's quite far from its own ports, one. Two, it lacks logistical support in the Indian Ocean region. And three, it has to deploy all its ships through a choke point, the Strait of Malacca. And how is it trying to overcome all these disadvantages?
Look, I think we cannot buy that argument, for the simple reason that China does everything in a very progressive manner. And I think here you must take into account what the latest military strategy paper of the Chinese, which white paper issued on 26th of May says. Now, if you look at that white paper, it's a progression on previous defense white papers. And as the Chinese military has modernized, as China has grown, its ability to extend itself into the blue waters has grown, it has steadily increased its naval presence and will continue to do that. Now, if you look at the latest white paper, and pardon me for just looking at my notes for a minute, the latest white paper very clearly says now that the PLA Navy will gradually shift focus from, quote, offshore water defense, unquote, to its combination with, quote, open seas protection. Now this, as I said at the very beginning, is part of the Chinese effort to protect their overseas interests and their overseas development interests. So I think you will see more and more of Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean, and as time goes by, see, we must distinguish between having a base and seeking facilities for rest, recreation, and refueling of your ships. Most countries will provide that facilities. It's not necessarily seen as an inimical activity. So you will see the Chinese Navy extend its reach into the oceans, into the blue waters, not just in the Indian Ocean, but also more and more in the other oceans.
But Ranga, quickly, in the Indian Ocean, India's been, or at least some people in India have pointed out to the ports that are being built, in Myanmar, in Hambantota, Gwadar. Now, do we in India confuse Chinese commercial port building activity with its military strategic interests, and do we do it deliberately?
Well, first let me come back to a point that was raised by Ambassador Suri. You see, this business of protection. Now, this protection so far post-World War is essentially provided by the United States. And let me recall, as I did in the earlier segment, that even when the Americans did certain things, when Americans perceived India as being in the Soviet camp, etc., and so on, it raised concerns in India. Therefore, it's not as if India is concerned about whether it is source, what is the source. It is more in regard to what is India's interest. And same way in which the Chinese are talking in terms of protecting their interests, we also have to protect our interests. Second question is that in regard to making these ports and so on, question is whether it is Hambantota or Gwadar. Actually, these are ports in terms of facilities, they are fine. But what are they connecting? There is no industrial hub around Gwadar. If at all that gets built up,
there will be once the China-Pakistan economic corridor comes.
When it happens, we shall see. But it's not as if it exists, and there is a requirement for a port. It is more a transit point, if at all, for Gulf gas, Gulf oil to pass through Pakistan into China, but that will have to be overland, either through pipes or through road transport. Both of which, really from an economic point of view, make no sense. Whatever the security aspects may be, let's leave aside that for a moment. From an economic point of view, it doesn't make sense. The Indian Ocean, or carrying through the ship, or even for that matter, rail, makes much greater sense. And rail network may not really be possible, given the terrain and so on. Now, therefore, when the Chinese are building these ports, we have to look at it not only from a commercial point of view. If it is commercial and serves the commercial purpose, that's one thing. But if the wherewithal for commercial activity doesn't exist around the place where a port is being built, then it is legitimate to ask the question, why are you building this port?
All right. Okay. So we need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing India and China jostling for influence in the Indian Ocean region. Jebin, what are the internal, external constraints which could limit India's role in the Indian Ocean?
Well, we have a very strong economic constraint. We need to be able to build ports. We need to be able to build ships. That's one thing. We also need to be able to generate trade to keep these ports and ships occupied. See, it's after all a numbers game. If we don't provide the numbers, the ships don't come to us, our ports run idle. That's the problem. Second, there are structural constraints in terms of how our systems are integrated. We need all our ministries, all our states and the central government to work together to have a holistic single policy to make this function. That includes certain rules common to all parties, but also a fair amount of decentralization and freedom of action at the local level as well.
Okay. Masuri, do you think that India needs, as it has been doing through joint vision statements, etc., cooperate with the United States in the Indian Ocean region? Because the United States by itself has the capacity to be the dominant power in the Indian Ocean. And if India is given a security role or carves a security role for itself in this region, along with with the US, through the cooperation of the US, what would be the quid pro quo involved?
I don't look at this from the quid pro quo perspective at all. You see, if we are willing to collaborate with the United States and its allies in the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific, as the joint statement says, I think we'll be equally happy to do that with the Chinese, as long as the Chinese are transparent about what they're doing. And some of the issues about this transparency or lack of it have arisen in today's discussion. And I think this is what the Chinese in India need to discuss as part of their defense dialogue. Because we are not saying that we will not collaborate with other countries in the Indian Ocean region. We are willing to do it with everybody.
Why? Even the former National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon had talked of cooperation with China in keeping the sea lines of communication.
It is part of the very original joint declaration signed on the principles for cooperation signed in June 2003 when Mr. Vajpayee went. So I think, we have to take forward the agreements we have at the highest political level and translate them into, on the ground, into implementable outcomes.
Yeah. Ranga, while India has maritime security arrangements with the island states of Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles and Mauritius, do you think we've been rather slow in developing cooperative relations with the larger states in this region, that is Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa and Australia?
These are arrangements or agreements that have to be of interest to both sides, and there has to be capability on both sides. Now, in the specific case of China, which you did not mention, the point is that history will show that every nation, as it becomes economically powerful, also becomes militarily powerful. Now, therefore, cooperation with common objectives is something that is very desirable and should be done.
I take that for granted. I'm merely saying we've concentrated on the small island countries, but not on the bigger countries.
I'm talking of those countries, the ones that you are mentioning. If they are common objectives, yes, of course, it's not only desirable, should be done, and hopefully it will get done. But the question is, are they common objectives? Because, and then capabilities also. Because very often, if India tries to have arrangements of this sort with one country or another, it is made out to appear as if it is directed against one country or another. And that is something which is not either India's intention, nor should be the way in which it should be projected.
So, Jeevan, last question really. Do you see India becoming the predominant maritime security provider in a region which stretches from the Red Sea to Singapore and also have a security role beyond that? My point is that would predominance in the Indian Ocean also lead to India gaining significant influence in East Asia also?
I don't think predominance is what we should be looking for. I think, look, we have to create rules that will be acceptable to all. The previous question you asked, why is it that we are not being able to cooperate with the big powers? We have to be acceptable. We can't be a big power that puts or looks hegemonic in the region. So I think there's a whole set of issues that go around this predominance. We have to be an economic power. We need to have, we need to be able to parlay our political influence, appear as if we are doing good in the region. We need to do good in the region. So I think this predominance is not just, the Indian Ocean region is not just the Indian Ocean. It's the economies of the countries around this Indian Ocean. So I think that's the level we should be talking about.
Ranga, you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to, these concepts like hegemonic gets attached to India because of our sheer size. Now we can't help our size. We're not going to cut ourselves down in order to suit somebody and make somebody else happy. We have to do what we have to do and what we should do. If we can do it in collaboration with others, very good. But the bottom line is, India must do what is required to be done in order to protect its interests.
Do you want to say something?
No, I said, I agree with both Ranga and Jabin. I think India has to look after its own interests, if necessary on its own. As far as possible, we'll collaborate with everybody, but in an open and transparent manner.
Including China.
Including China, and of course, but we have to protect our own interests. I mean, that is the bottom line. And for that, we have to set our own house in order, both economic, political, and social.
We've really run out of time, so we have to conclude this discussion. I'd like to thank all of you, Dr. Jebin Jacob, Ambassador T.C. Rangachari, Ambassador Nalin Suri for participating in this discussion. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching India's World.